We are back in Joshua chapter 10, finishing up the story that we started last week. So this is basically the conclusion of said story in Joshua. So Joshua obviously is the book that depicts how the children of Israel conquered the promised land. So we've been going through this story, and many battles have taken place already. The one that we started last week was about this coalition of kings that came together, not necessarily to attack the Israelites, but they wanted to attack an ally of the Israelites, the Gibeonites, namely. Remember the story of the Gibeonites? They went to Joshua and the leaders. They kind of tricked them into making a treaty and a covenant with them. And even though, again, something of an unethical a way of going about doing things, nevertheless, they were able to survive and became subjects of the Israelites. So now they were sort of servants of the children of Israel. And these other kings, the city-states within the promised land, they heard about the Gibeonites. They knew that they were a mighty people. They had a strong army. And they were reluctant to allow them to continue to thrive and survive in such fashion, very likely because they feared that other city-states would follow in the same trend. So they wanted to attack them, to send a message, very likely, to the other kings and kingdoms of that area, not to try to make a treaty with the Israelites. So they came together, and the Gibeonites, they saw that they were being attacked, so they sent word to Joshua. They sent word to the Israelites saying, look, your servants are being attacked. You come and you defend us because we are basically your servants, your possession. We belong to you. They're trying to attack what belongs to you. Joshua very likely prayed to God, and we saw that interaction where God said, go. I'm going to be with you. You will be successful. So Joshua got his army, his best men. They traveled throughout the night and finally arrived at this location where this coalition of kings that were being led by the king of Jerusalem. Don't confuse that with the Jerusalem, the idea of Jerusalem when King David, inaugurated that place as its capital. This is still within a period of time where it was a pagan city led by a pagan king that was named Jerusalem. So this king gathered up other kings, and they were about to attack the Gibeonites. Joshua came to the rescue, and they started fighting. Again, God was before them. God was ahead of them. God was with them. So they were being very successful. It was literally a slaughter, the way that it was being described there. These kings, this coalition, they were no match, to the point where eventually they just started running away. Everyone was dying. Hail was falling from the skies, strategically only hitting the enemies. So they were scattering, hiding, and fleeing. And Joshua noticed this, and he wanted to end things at that particular day. So what did he do? He prayed to God. He asked God, God, allow the sun to stand still. And miraculously, the sun stood still. The earth stopped rotating. We don't know exactly how to explain that in scientific terms. As I mentioned previously, last week, some catastrophic things would have occurred. Nevertheless, God has the power to go beyond the laws of nature to the point where these things can happen because, again, God is the Lord of all. So I don't have a problem understanding that this, in fact, happened. So as the day was prolonged, Joshua and the army, they were after the enemies as they were fleeing. And this is where we pick up here, them trying to finish off what they started in this battle. So we will read from verse 16 on, again, in Joshua chapter 10. If you have your Bibles, go ahead and open to that portion of Scripture. If not, it will be projected there for you, and you can just listen as I read. From verse 16 to verse 27. And it says, "But these 5 kings had fled and hidden themselves in a cave at Makkedah. And it was told Joshua, saying, the 5 kings had been found hidden in the cave at Makkedah. So Joshua said, roll large stones against the mouth of the cave and set men by it to guard them. And do not stay there yourselves, but pursue your enemies and attack their rear guard. Do not allow them to enter their cities, for the Lord your God has delivered them into your hands." Then it happened, while Joshua and the children of Israel made an end of slaying them with a very great slaughter, till they had finished, that those who escaped entered fortified cities, and all the people returned to the camp to Joshua at Makkedah in peace. No one moved his tongue against any of the children of Israel. Then Joshua said, "Open the mouth of the cave, and bring out those 5 kings to me from the cave." And they did so, and brought out those 5 kings to him from the cave, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, and the king of Eglon. Verse 24. And it was when they brought out those kings to Joshua, that Joshua called for all the men of Israel and said to the captains of the men of war who went with him, "Come near, put your feet on their necks of these kings." And they drew near and put their feet on their necks. Then Joshua said to them, "Do not be afraid nor dismayed. Be strong and be of good courage, for thus the Lord will do to all your enemies against whom you fight." And afterwards Joshua struck them and killed them and hanged them on 5 trees, and they were hanging on the trees until evening. So it was at the time of the going down of the sun that Joshua commanded, and they took them down from the trees, cast them in the cave where they had been hidden, and laid large stones against the cave's mouth, which remain till this day. Very heartwarming story. When I was reading this passage and studying for it, it's one of those passages where, as a pastor, you go, oh boy. You have to explain it, but you also have to extract some type of a theme, an ethical principle, if you will. So it'll be applicable, not only informational, but I did struggle. And, you look through commentaries and even, sift through other study material online. And truth be told, I didn't find anything. I could not find a thing. So I had to just be very creative with this. And hopefully by the end of our time here, my efforts are going to be rewarded. So let's just kind of review what is happening here. So I already caught you up to the point where the sun is standing still. And the armies of the enemy, they are scattering. They're running away. They know that it is just a matter of time before they all die. It's a slaughter. It's a complete slaughter. And the leaders of this army, the 5 kings, who, by the way, initiated this whole conflict, what did they do? They hid. They found a cave. Nothing special about this cave other than it was very cavey. A good place to hide. A dark place where they thought no one would find them. But guess what? Somebody saw. And then they went and told Joshua, "Hey Joshua, do you know what we saw? Do you know what happened? The 5 kings, the ones who started this whole conflict, they're there in this cave. And they're hiding. What should we do? What can we do? What might we do about this?" And Joshua, very wisely, again, he wanted to finish them off. He did not want to, quote unquote, waste time on the kings just yet. So what does he do? He tells them, this is what's going to happen. Go ahead and roll some stones, some large boulders on the mouth of this cave. And then go about your business. We continue this battle. We are going to finish them off. I didn't pray to God to, hold the sun still for nothing. We're not going to waste our times. Let them be for now. We do not want them to escape. Roll these boulders, these rocks in the mouth of the cave so that they cannot escape. So they did so, and then Joshua commanded them, go and finish off your enemies. Eventually, they did. Everyone, before they were able to reach their cities, because they were again fleeing home, but before they were able to get there, they were all killed, they were all slaughtered and defeated. And now they go back to this area, seemingly where Joshua, amongst other leaders, they were staying there. And celebrating, if you will, but they still had, to cross some T's, dot some I's, namely, deal with these kings. So Joshua gathered the people around, and specifically, he addressed his commanders, the people who were in charge of his army, and said, okay, now let's roll away these boulders, these rocks. Can you imagine the kings there, initially thinking that this was a great hiding place? Eventually, this great hiding place became their prison. What are we going to do? How are we going to escape now? Eventually, they hear the rocks being pulled out, rolled away. And here comes Joshua and the commanders. And Joshua tells his commanders, this is what you're going to do. As they are there, deep inside this cave, cowering, you are going to grab them and step upon their necks. Brutal. Right? Brutal. Joshua was not kidding around. He meant business. So they stepped upon the king's necks. And Joshua went ahead and finished them off, killed them. And as we've seen before, to send a message to the other Canaanite kings, to the other enemies, those who were warring against the children of Israel, those who God had already established a time for their punishment. Because he wanted others to take notice what happens when you go against God, he put them on display, hanging them on trees. I've referenced this before. The term can mean a pole, can mean an actual tree, can mean a cross-like thing. Very likely they were hung, strapped by their hands throughout the day. There was a portion of the law that did not allow those who received this type of capital punishment to stay overnight. So Joshua hung them on 5 trees, quote unquote, if you will, until sundown. Again, an extended period of time because Joshua had prayed to God to extend the day, but then once things went back to normal, Joshua took them down, threw them inside their cave, and there's a note here that it says that they remain there till this very day. When is this very day? I don't know. They might still be there, but at the very least, they were there when this was originally written. Again, the place where they thought would be their shelter, their hiding site, became their prison and eventually became their grave. Isn't that symbolic? Isn't that meaningful? Oftentimes we go in searching, we lurk, and we sift through these potentially hiding places, these dark corners of life, thinking that this is going to be my shelter. This is going to be the place where I cope. This is going to bring me joy, satisfaction. This is where I run away from my troubles. This is where I get to forget my safe hiding place. Eventually, the safe hiding place becomes your prison. It traps you. You get stuck in it. The thing that you thought brought you most joy now becomes the thing that is capturing you and won't let go of you. The thing that you thought that you had power over now has power over you. And if that is allowed to continue, not only does it become your prison, unfortunately, it becomes your final resting place. Poignant of the human condition. And as I mentioned, reading through this story, especially the end of the story, and thinking about certain principles, themes, topics that I can focus on. Couldn't find anything online. And I never plagiarize sermons, but every once in a while, especially for a text like this, I get curious. What do other people talk about? Because it's not coming to me right away. It's not obvious. It's not very evident what I should focus on. And again, truth be told, I couldn't find anything good. Most people, when they teach on this text, they skip it, or they get very allegorical. I found a lot of things pertaining to, how you should slaughter the 5 sins of your lives and not have mercy upon them. And each king was one aspect of our sin nature that must be trapped, that must be slaughtered, that you should not have mercy. I'm not going to put you through that because I myself could not go through that. But every once in a while, when you read through and you try to learn and teach, most importantly, on a text like this, you kind of have to step out of the author's original intention. The author here just wanted to, plain and simple, inform you of a story. Here, there really isn't anything in particular that he wanted to teach that we have not yet covered. We've covered the fact that God is sovereign. We covered the fact that God was was with the children of Israel. And if they were with God, they were successful. If they were not with God, they were not successful. We've seen them be both. We've covered the fact that when the children of Israel obeyed God, went to him in prayer, that everything seemingly went well. And if they didn't, everything seemingly went wrong. So I cannot repeat those principles. I will not repeat those principles because we've already covered that. So what can we do here? How can we sort of make connections between this story and a topic in the Bible that maybe parallels it, right? That will highlight certain principles here, but even go beyond. Think about this for a second. This essentially is a story about 5 kings in a cave. And I thought, the Bible does tell us, inform us of another story of a king that ended up in a cave. Remember that story? No, not him. The other king. Jesus. The king that ended up in a cave. And now we're going to compare and contrast these 2 stories. Kings in caves. And I was trying to compare and contrast and glean the realities of this story with the reality of Jesus, who ended up in this cave-like burial site. And initially, the thought that came to mind was the fact that when Jesus entered into this cave-like burial site. He did so dead. Remember the story? Dead. God died. No other way to explain it. He wasn't half dead. He wasn't almost dead. He did not faint. He wasn't faking it. God died and was put into a cave-like burial site. In contrast, these kings very much chose to go into their cave and hide there, alive. They walked in on purpose. They were willing to go inside this cave. Jesus, he was taken there, his body lifeless. These kings were ultimately trying to save their necks. That is why they ended up in said cave. They looked around, and in both stories, remember that? Perfect parallel, but for completely different reasons. For these kings, large stones were rolled into the mouth of the cave, and guards were placed around that region so that they would not escape, so they wouldn't leave the cave. For what reason was a large stone rolled into Jesus' burial site? A dead body in there. Did they fear that Jesus would leave? No. It was so that no one would enter the cave. So no one would steal the body, seemingly, and make up stories regarding Jesus. No one imagined, no one thought that he could live, that he could that was even the disciples, they thought that game was over. They were distraught. All of them ran away. We give Peter a hard time, but all of them distraught, saddened, worst day of their lives, and rightly so. They thought, he is dead. Story is over. Seal the cave. He is never coming out. Little did they know that that stone would be rolled away, and he, in fact, would come out. Again, not because people feared that or even planned that or thought that it was possible, but because of God's will. Defeating death. Inaugurating the reality of those who believed and would continue to believe in him. Drastically different. Both stories depict kings being hung on a tree. And they follow the same premise that we've seen in the law. They shall not remain in that position beyond this allowed time of sundown. These 5 kings were hung. Jesus crucified. All taken down within that day. But while these kings deserved what they got, Jesus did not. He was hung. He was crucified. Not because of any fault that was found in him. Literally, quite literally speaking, he was the only human without fault. Very much God, 100% human. And out of all of the humans throughout history, only one was without fault. Jesus is the one. And he hung there. Not because of what he did, but because of what we do till this day. We know that the bodies of these kings, they stayed in this cave. And the writer makes note of that till this day. Again, their hiding place became their prison, and their prison became their burial site. And while people thought that that cave would have become Jesus' final resting place, on that glorious morning, he arose from the dead. Could not be contained. Death could not hold. Literally defeated our greatest enemy. Inaugurated, initiated the first fruits of what is to come to all of those who believed in him. These 5 kings, till this day, dead. Not alive. Jesus, our King, could not stay in that status. Alive by the Father's side till this day. When Joshua and the commanders opened the cave and approached these cowering kings, again, Joshua wanted to send a message, and he told his commanders, step upon their necks. Our King crushed the serpent's head. It nicked him, right? It got him. He felt pain. He was hurt. It affected him. But in the end, he crushed the neck and the head of the serpent. The enemy is defeated. And even though there are remnants of his influence and power upon this world, he is still reigning. It is just a matter of time before it is all taken care of. It is all finalized. The script, the story has been written. The fate has been established. He is defeated. It is just a matter of time before that comes to full fruition and culmination. Our King crushed the serpent's head for good. There's no coming back from that. There's no resurrecting that. He is defeated. And as we think upon the parallels between these two stories, put yourself in the situation, the condition, the perspective, the position of subjects. Isn't it wonderful that you get to have a king like this? Those other kings, maybe they were, intriguing, nice to look at, eloquent, even a sense of, authority and power, impressive. But at the end, cowards, hiding away, fearful, not caring for their subjects, only caring for their own lives. Isn't it a wonderful thing to have not only the ability, but the privilege of being considered servants of this type of king who did all of this and much more, even when we had not acknowledged him as such, even while we were still in disbelief, in sin, not caring, not believing, he still did it while we were in that state. And those of us who truly believe, who have faith, we get to enjoy. We get to enjoy the outcome of this bond and this relationship. We get to experience new life, the life that he gave to us. He sacrificed his own to give us life. Thank God for our King. Amen.